Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Weekly Waypoint. Today we are playing Need for Speed Porsche Unleashed, the 5th game in the series? I'm already losing count. If I'm being honest, this one, despite I know it's a main entry, feels more like a spin-off title because this one only features Porsche cars exclusively. But also, critically, having played the previous 4 games back to back, this one feels like it's a new game made by different developers from the ground up because you know, the UI is different, the handling is different, the way the game is structured is different, the amount of cars, the amount of tracks is different. It's just a different racing game. It feels like it has practically zero holdover from previous Need for Speed titles. That being said, I do get the impression that it is a much-loved entry in the series, so I shouldn't shake my finger at it too sternly. It is a fun racing game, I had a decent time playing it, although I will say the one critique I have is that most tracks seem to have an obsession with a harsh 90-degree angle corner, which made this a little frustrating to play sometimes. You'll see in future races that aren't this one, I have a little bit of difficulty getting to grips with the handling in this game and how harsh some of these corners end up being. More than my gameplay in any other Need for Speed title that we've done, I continually crash into walls, bounce off them in interesting ways and try to recover my speed. As an aside, the concept of a racing game that focuses only on one car manufacturer reminds me of a series of PS2 racing games we owned back in the day called Ford Racing. I know that at the very least we own Ford Racing 2 and Ford Racing 3. I would be interested to go back and revisit those games at some point because they seem kind of niche. Like, I know it's a car manufacturer that's not niche, but as far as racing games go, I never hear people talk about them. We might revisit them on the Weekly Waypoint at some point in the future. But to get back to this car manufacturer exclusivity game, it seems like one thing that they did do to make it cool is have this thing called an evolution mode, which I haven't actually played, and I don't actually really know anything about. Well, one would assume that you start off in a very old Porsche car, and you work your way up to the newer and faster and cooler models, hence the name Evolution, and if that is the case, I think that's pretty cool. This game also continues the Hot Pursuit legacy of having a police chase mode, which we will explore at the end of this video. It is also the final Need for Speed game on PlayStation 1, and the final Need for Speed game made by the original development team, it seems like. After this entry, EA Black Box took over with Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2 on the PS2. And fans who, I guess, play the PC versions of these games and don't really care about console generations seem to refer to these first 5 Need for Speed games as like the classic series, which I think is pretty fun. I would still like to go and check out the PC versions of these games and just see how different they are, because I know sometimes differences can vary greatly, but again, it's a little bit more difficult to find old PC games and to get them to run in the first place, so that might be a future project. Speaking of future projects, though, I did mention at the start of this series that this retrospective was just going to be all the PS1 games. I'm considering checking out Hot Pursuit 2 next week anyway, but I do kind of want to have a PS2 retrospective at some point too, so maybe I'll hold off until then. But I guess to cap out my thoughts on the Need for Speed PS1 era, it's been really fun to go back and play these games and see them for what they were back in the day, especially considering I started with Need for Speed Underground, which shockingly is like 2 entries away from this one. Need for Speed 3 Hot Pursuit does remain my favourite of the bunch. I just really like the tracks and the general handling and vibe of that game, I guess. And it's probably going to be the one I keep and just kind of choose if I ever feel like playing an older Need for Speed game or an older racing title. But I haven't regretted checking out a single one of these. I don't think there's really been a stinker in the bunch. For what it's worth, Porsche Unleashed on PS1 reviewed at around a 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, and then on PC it was more of an 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. So again, there's going to be differences there that might be worth checking out. This one also had a GBA version, first one, and maybe the only one to have such a thing. That one did not review well, as you might expect from a GBA racing game. Another thing I really want to do one day, and I don't think it would really work for the Weekly Waypoint as a series, but I would like to make a series where I just go through and check out the different versions of games. So like a PS2 game and its PC version and its GBA version and its DS version, because sometimes those are both things that exist for one game. And just kind of like compare the 2 or the 3 or the 4, because I do find that stuff fascinating and I hope other people do too. Maybe next week we'll just check out the GBA version of this game. I really don't know what we're doing next week. Let me know if it's anything you would like to see. But we could do a one-off special checking out the GBA version of this game, I guess. Oh, actually, I know I was doing my whole series wrap-up thing here, but this track reminds me. This game also seemed to play with terrain a whole bunch. Like, there were different road types and stuff, and your car would handle differently on them, the most obvious being dirt. I'm holding it a burp. But yeah, Need for Speed. 'Tis a series. 'Tis still a series. It's gone under dramatic change and upheaval, but this is where its roots were. This is what it originally was. But Need for Speed Porsche Unleashed is not the only game I've been playing this week. I've had a very Star Wars week, and that's because I finished Season 2 of Andor, which I will not be talking about here, not in a spoiler capacity at the very least. You can go to my Kritigri Talk Stories channel for that, link in the description. But I thought Andor Season 2 was exceptional. I know, very contrary opinion. And of course it put me in a bit of a Star Wars mood for the rest of the week. I have played Star Wars Battlefront 2. I have played LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. I have played Star Wars Jedi Academy. But most of all, I've been playing... Oh, I should probably mention as well, I know I'm like a month late to Andor if this is weird to anyone listening. I've been playing Star Wars Outlaws, which I picked up for half price in a recent Steam sale. I've been interested in Star Wars Outlaws since it was first announced because... Now, if we are talking about a legitimately contrary opinion, I tend to quite like Ubisoft's modern open-world games. I understand and agree with a lot of the common criticisms from a gameplay perspective in terms of map vomit and all of that stuff, but I tend to think they do a really good job creating an immersive open world that creates an aesthetic, a vibe, a theme. Assassin's Creed Origins and Odyssey are some of my favourite games in the entire series, and some of my favourite games full stop. I also quite like Valhalla, but that one definitely suffers from the bloat. I played some Watch Dogs Legion a few years ago, and I was really surprised with how great that game was, considering the general criticism it was receiving. And so I kind of knew that no matter what people said about Star Wars Outlaws, just from looking at it as it was being revealed and understanding what kind of game it was going to be, that it would be for me. Which is kind of interesting, because... I'm actually not really super into the whole underworld side of the Star Wars universe. That's not really my bag most of the time. But as far as turning it into a video game goes, it does create gameplay styles which do appeal to me, such as stealthy games and stuff like that. Did I mention I'm an Assassin's Creed enjoyer? Did I mention I enjoyed Watch Dogs Legion? And so I've been waiting for Watch Dogs Legion to go on sale for a decent price, because... I know it's not going to be like a 10 out of 10, I know it's not going to be a game of the year, but I also know that I'm going to have a good time with it. I'm looking for a 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 experience out of that game, hence waiting for the sale. As someone who does not get on with Souls-likes and has tried Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order several times and just cannot stick to it, when I saw the gameplay of Star Wars Outlaws, I was like, this is the one for me. This is the modern AAA Star Wars game for me. I am 8 hours into the game, and so far, I'm not disappointed. I'm having a really good time with it. If you're not familiar, it is of limited space exploration scope, so don't go hoping for something like No Man's Sky or Starfield in terms of the amount of planets to go and visit, but I like that in a science fiction game. I like a tightly crafted selection of a handful of worlds to go and visit, and Star Wars Outlaws has, I think, 5, maybe 6 worlds in there, and the choices on the surface are a little surprising because a few of them... I can't talk. A few of them are sequel planets, and the sequel trilogy did not go down well. But this game is set around the time of Empire Strikes Back, I believe, or maybe shortly afterwards, and so this is seeing those worlds in an earlier era in the universe, which is potentially interesting. And also, what I do like is this game kind of takes them out of the sequel trilogy, and obviously you're exploring them through the eyes of Kay Vest during this different time in the universe, so you get to kind of revisit those ideas and be like, okay, these were ideas for worlds in the Star Wars universe that happened to take place in the sequel trilogy, which everyone hated, but if we take those out of the sequel trilogy and explore them in a different medium, maybe they can still become a interesting place to explore in the universe, you know what I mean? We're not going to Canto Bight, that casino planet from The Last Jedi. We're not going there to do the casino planet problems from The Last Jedi. We're there because we're there, and we get to actually explore it within a context that makes sense for the planet. And so you see I'm focusing on the world aspect of Star Wars Outlaws here, because I think it is the strongest aspect. I think the team who made this game very clearly has a lot of love for Star Wars lore. It is absolutely packed with just Star Wars stuff. And if you do like the Star Wars universe and you do like the lore, you will probably have a really good time just exploring, to be honest. And I'm not talking about exploring in like an expansive sense. You don't have an entire planet to go out and walk around in. But it is, again, that tightly crafted, like, here is a city. It has lots of streets and alleyways and shops and places you can go in and people talking, and you can go and play sabacc and stuff like that. It's not about the size of the area, it's about the depth of it, which, to be honest, a lot more open world games could use today. But in terms of the actual gameplay, like, what is it like? I think the best way I can sum it up is this. Most Star Wars games focus on the fantasy of wielding a laser sword and being an unstoppable Jedi or whatever. Or maybe not an unstoppable Jedi, but like one that is trying to survive within this world which is still super dangerous for everyone else to kill him. You know what I mean? It's usually a Jedi thing. Or if you do have a person with a blaster game, it's just kind of like your standard shooter experience. I'm looking at you, Star Wars Battlefront 2. Although that campaign is slept on, people should go play the campaign, it's pretty fun. Star Wars Outlaws specifically caters to that Star Wars fantasy of infiltrating an enemy area and scrambling for survival when it all goes wrong. That is a recurring idea within almost every Star Wars story, but I've yet to see a video game really capture that feeling. Star Wars Outlaws excels in that because you are sneaking around and doing infiltration things and, sneaking past people, bonking them on the head, distracting them, all that lovely stuff. And if you do an entire objective or mission without being seen, it's really satisfying and it feels great. But there's also every chance that they will spot you, and you will have to whip out your gun and shoot them and scramble and like blow up barrels and stuff and try not to die because you are quite mortal in this game. And that also feels really fun. And I don't think I've ever seen a Star Wars game do that so well. As far as the story goes, it's yet to really grab me. It's honestly the gameplay that's keeping me around in the world. It's fine, the story's fine, K-Vess is fine, like, I'm paying attention, but I'm not excited about whatever might be coming next. That could be the Star Wars underworld unenthusiast in me. Is unenthusiast a word? But yeah, I'm not exactly invested in that aspect of things, and I think the whole reputation system with the different factions of the underworld and how you're constantly just being absolutely mercenary and choosing who to backstab to get a specific, well, not to get a specific reward, but to get to it in a specific route, if you know what I mean. I think that can result in a kind of feeling of a lack of consequence sometimes, and a lack of any real loyalty or relationships being formed within the narrative. So if I had any real criticisms to give, I think those would be it, but beyond that, I'm having a great time. Also, yes, to round off my Star Wars week thoughts, after I finished Andor Season 2, I did go and watch Rogue One, and it did hit much harder. I never really liked that film before, but now I think it's an incredible film. And then I went and watched A New Hope as well. I don't know if I'm going to watch, like, Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi after that. I might have had my fill, but it was really fun to see both of those films with new context. Also this week, outside of the region of Star Wars, I went back and I finally finished that JRPG that I've been working on that ends in a free, Final Fantasy free. I know I said I'm trying to concentrate on Dragon Quest free, but the problem is a YouTube channel that I follow, probably my favourite YouTube channel, Grinding Gear, have just announced that they're going to be going through and playing every single Final Fantasy game, and I want to keep ahead of them so that I can kind of like see their experiences from someone who knows the games themselves. So they are working on Final Fantasy 2 right now, and I was like, well, I guess I gotta go back to Final Fantasy 3, which is a game that I've had a lot of issues with, namely the job system and how the game constantly requires you to switch jobs to solve certain puzzles or certain encounters which feel like puzzles if you don't have the right jobs. It doesn't end up feeling rewarding to get that right, it feels punishing for not knowing ahead of time. and very frustrating when you need a certain job to defeat a certain enemy and a certain weapon for that certain job to defeat a certain enemy, and the only way to get that certain weapon is to get past a cave full of those enemies to get the weapon to defeat the... Yeah, you might have seen in my Final Fantasy III video I put out yesterday, but I got quite frustrated with that game. However, I did stick to it. I was 6 hours in last time I left that game alone, and I decided to come back to it and finish it. I finished it. It was about an 18-hour game, at least by my playtime. And despite the frustrations, and despite my gripes with the game, I actually did end up having a good time with Final Fantasy III. I'm glad I stuck with it. Final Fantasy III kind of establishes a lot of things which will become mainstays within the Final Fantasy franchise. It establishes, first of all, a lot of the jobs for the first time, and the job system which apparently will show up again in later games. But also chocobos and moogles and a bunch of kind of endgame story elements that I'm not going to spoil, which show up a few times in future Final Fantasy games. And obviously it also holds over previous Final Fantasy villains and summons and all that kind of thing. Actually, did we have summons in previous Final Fantasy games? I don't think we did. This might have established that as well. But yeah, it's wild to me because when I was coming to play these games for the first time last year, in my head, everyone hated Final Fantasy 2 and everyone loved Final Fantasy 3. And now that I've played them, I love Final Fantasy 2, and I kind of... I don't hate, but I have a lot of problems with Final Fantasy 3. And to be honest, learning more about the series and people's impressions on it, it just kind of seems more like 3 doesn't leave much of an impression on people. But I think 3 has aged the worst out of all of them that I've played so far, because I think the Pixel Remaster has done a lot to fix up the issues of 2 and 3, to be fair, because there used to be a penalty for swapping jobs, which would have made this game absolute hell. But I still think just from a game design standpoint, 3 has aged worse than 2. But now I get to play Final Fantasy IV, which is what 3 kind of in general felt like a gate like barring the way to, which obviously you don't need to play any Final Fantasy game before any of the others. They're all independent experiences, at least narratively, but from like a meta standpoint, I really want to play each game in order, especially now that this YouTube channel I'm following are kind of doing the same thing. So yeah, I'm very satisfied that I can now say I've finished 3, I've completed it, I've beaten it, and I can go on and start playing 4, which I have done. I had played the first hour and a half of Final Fantasy IV once before, but I decided to start fresh just to keep everything fresh in my memory, and I have since got back up to the spot where I stopped playing last time. Final Fantasy IV introduces the active time battle system, which I still have mixed feelings about, but I don't feel as vehemently negative towards it as I did the first time I picked this game up. I'm kind of learning to be patient and go with the flow with these old JRPGs a little bit more than I used to, which is probably the attitude which saved me and kept me playing 3 till the end, despite hitting numerous points of frustration and rage. But yeah, 4 is definitely a lot more narrative focused than any of the previous games have been. I think in the first hour and a half of this game I've seen more lines of dialogue than I've seen in maybe 2 of the previous games combined. Which on the one hand is great, because a more involved story equals a more intrigued Christian, but on the other hand means I've been taking a lot more clips, and that these videos might end up being longer series from this point onwards. I guess in the gaming department I should also mention I resubscribed to Final Fantasy XIV, which wasn't exactly the plan, but a friend expressed interest in playing it, so I thought, I could go for some 14, why not? So it's re-downloaded, it's resubbed. I don't know if I'm going to spend a ton of time in the game, I might just be about for a month or so, but we'll see. There's still a lot coming up in World of Warcraft that I want to be spending time with, so who knows how I will juggle the 2 MMOs. I don't love being subscribed to both at the same time, I try and avoid it usually, but we'll see. Anyway, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Weekly Waypoint. Join us back here next week when we'll be playing... Who knows? Might be Hot Pursuit 2, might be this game in GBA form, might be a one-off. I don't know yet. Either way, I will catch you then. Damn, the sound design in this game is wild.